Coming up on this episode, a preview of the Warriors matchup with the Atlanta Hawks at Chase Center on Wednesday, and in particular a focus on what should be a fascinating battle between Stephen Curry and Dyson Daniels. Also on this episode are the Warriors facing an all too familiar issue with their younger players, and the Brooklyn Nets, they're open for business when it comes to the trade market, should the Warriors be interested in any of their players. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Recording this at about 9:30, I think it is, Pacific time in the US at the moment, 4:30 p.m. for us, Eastern Standard Time in Australia. I've actually just got home. I've been playing tennis for a couple of hours, and got home to see some interesting scores. The Lakers currently beating the Jazz and look like they're going to get the win there. But the big thing from a Warriors standpoint is that the Spurs somehow got a 110-104 win over the Oklahoma City Thunder without Victor Wembanyama, which means the Warriors, despite yesterday's loss to the Clippers, are back on top as the 1 seed in the Western Conference right now. Just to start off the episode on a bit of a lighter note. So I sat here about this time yesterday for a 40-minute post-game live and absolutely scolded the Warriors for their woeful free throw shooting yesterday against the Clippers, going 9 of 19, which really cost them the game when the margin was obviously 3 points at the end of it. Finished that an hour later, go to my own basketball game. Fourth quarter comes around. I had a pretty good game. It was a quarterfinal. We were the We Believe Warriors as the 8th seed, trying to beat the 1 seed in the quarterfinal. We actually played all right. It was one of our best games of the season. We lost by 11. But it gets to the fourth quarter. Your boy's playing all right. Like, it was probably the best game I'd played in quite some months. I had a team-high 14 points, but should have been more. Got the ball under the rim. Nice pump fake. Got the guy in the air. He comes down, absolutely clobbers me. Go to the free throw line for 2 shots. And after everything I'd said about the absolutely disgusting nature of the Warriors' free throw shooting, I go to the free throw line and just brick 2 free throws. So do as I say, not do as I do if you're the Warriors, because me going 0 of 2 in that situation was always going to be pretty obvious after the barrage of disappointment that I'd given the Warriors on that post-game live yesterday. But we lost. I think we lost by 11. It was like 54-43 or something like that. We actually played pretty well. The refereeing was, I don't think they listen to this podcast or watch on YouTube, so I'm happy to say the refereeing was not great. Let's put it that way. But it was actually not great in our favour. The other team, I think, we had an opportunity midway through the third quarter. I think we got it back to about 5 midway through the third quarter. And they were clearly getting pissed off because they thought, okay, we're the 1 seed against the 8 seed here. We should be beating them easily. And a lot of the refereeing was going against them. Like, there were so many times they were like getting to the rim and we were fouling them pretty hard, it must be said, and the refs were just letting it go. It's just classic Tuesday night social league basketball. And then they just hit a bunch of threes. I reckon they made about 7 or 8 threes on the night. We made 2, and that was ultimately the difference in the game. So a little bit disappointing, but nothing more obvious than me going 0 of 2 at the free throw line after scolding the Warriors for their own free throw shooting woes against the Clippers yesterday. If you want to go check out my form, I've posted a photo on Twitter of that. Just not a great free throw shoot. I'm okay. I'm not sure what I'd be on the season, but like, I think it's just a game situation. You get me there, messing around before the game and whatever else, taking free throws. I'm probably going to make most of them, but anyway, it is what it is. Let's get on to tomorrow's matchup between the Warriors and the Atlanta Hawks. The Warriors trying to avoid back-to-back losses for the first time this season and looking to continue or keep their claim as the top seed in the West, as I just said. The Hawks are going to be perhaps a tougher opponent than what we otherwise give them credit for, though. So they're 7-8 on the season, which is not great, but that is good enough for 5th in the Eastern Conference. But their recent form is actually pretty impressive. They've won 3 of their last 4, including wins at Boston and Sacramento. Now, really the matchup I'm looking forward to here is, of course, as I said in the intro, Stephen Curry versus Dyson Daniels. I don't think I've been more excited for an individual matchup so far this season, because we know Dyson's going to get the main role on Steph, and you've got Steph Curry, one of the most challenging players to guard in the history of the game. Dyson's been fantastic this season, but when you come up against Steph Curry, it's a completely different ball game in terms of no one obviously clearly shoots the ball like Steph Curry. We know that. But like the movement as well, and the movement on and off the ball that you have to contend with as a defender. Like, this is going to be a whole new challenge for Dyson Daniels. And it's going to be not a whole new challenge for Steph, because he's faced almost anything and everything that NBA defenses have had to throw at him over 16 years now. But this guy has become one of the premier defenders in the league, particularly on the perimeter. And some of the stuff that he's been doing lately is just ridiculous and historic. It's just crazy, some of the numbers from Dyson Daniels. Like, he's the first player, recently became the first player since MJ to have 15 plus points and 5 plus steals in 4 consecutive games. He had 28 steals over that 4-game span. I think it was like 7, 6, 6, and 6. Like, that is ridiculous. That is stupid. He's got way more steals. I think he's 44 steals on the season or something. And the next best is like 29 or something. Deflections, he's at like 91 for the season. The next best is De'Aaron Fox at 57. There's only 4 other players in the league outside of the man himself that have even half the amount of deflections, like 45 or more deflections, than Dyson Daniels. It's like Fox, I think Anunoby might be up there. There's 5 guys that have more than 45 deflections. Now, that may have changed based on today's game, but still, like, you get an idea of how good this guy is defensively. And, purely from an Australian standpoint, I've absolutely loved watching and seeing his development over the first 13 or so games of this season. I think he's gone past Josh Giddey as Australia's best NBA player, and I'm so glad that he's got the opportunity now in Atlanta following the trade, which now looks like a pretty horrific one for the Pelicans. The fact they gave up Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance, and a couple of like future first-round picks for DeJounte Murray, who, in fairness, has been out injured, so hasn't been able to showcase his ability, which, he's has been an all-star in the past. I'm not sure if he's an all-star level player anymore, but close. They're rung down from an all-star level player. So he hasn't been able to showcase his ability, which obviously makes it, a little bit different and makes it look very easy to see what Dyson Daniels is doing and just throw that off as a really bad trade for the Pelicans, at least through the first month of this season. But yeah, I'm just so proud of Dyson and so glad and happy for what he's doing with Atlanta right now. Not just on the defensive end, where he's clearly all NBA first team defense, no doubt about that right now. He's in the depoy conversation, at least. I do have a bit of an issue. Like, I do wonder how much defensive player of the year, I wonder how much team defense and where the team is ranked on defense should actually matter in individual, like, defensive player of the year. Because if that's the case, like, Atlanta, Dyson's great, but the Hawks are still, I think, like 22nd or something in defense. Like, they're not actually a good defensive team. Even like the Spurs with Wemby, like, they're not great defensively necessarily. But then you look at, like, and I think if you're trying to make an argument for someone like Draymond, then at the end of the season, if he's still in and around the conversation, then you try and point to, okay, here the Warriors are a top 5 defense, and it's mainly because of Draymond, and that's how you'd make an argument for him. I don't think that necessarily means, well, I do think it means a bit, because we've seen Gobert obviously lead Minnesota. What were they, the best or second best defense in the league last season? He obviously won another one. So I think it does mean something. And obviously for Dyson and his argument right now, that obviously doesn't help too much the fact that Atlanta actually aren't very good defensively. It's just him individually who can be so disruptive. Even a game like yesterday against the Kings, where he doesn't have a steal whatsoever, but he just has 4 blocks instead, including the game when he won on De'Aaron Fox, when Fox kind of drove left, was about to pull up for a kind of a baseline jump shot, and Dyson got him on the way up. Which was basically a strip. They called it a block. There was maybe a foul in there, but wasn't called. Obviously, Dyson got the rebound, threw it back Trae Young. Hawks win the game over the Kings there. But I don't think I've seen a player there's very few. It's very rare, let's put it that way, to see a player who has an absolutely elite combination of size. So he's like 6'7", like longish wingspan, quick hands, and also like the defensive IQ. From a Warrior standpoint, it's probably like Iggy is maybe like the best exponent of like all three, where Iggy was like 6'6", 6'7", long wingspan, was the master of like just stripping the ball. Like you put the ball out in front of me going up for a layup, like I'm just going to come down and just strip it away from you. And obviously he had the defensive mindset as well. Like there's a lot of players around the league who probably have two of those. Like even currently, if you look at a guy like Steph, right? It's like he actually he's got pretty good hands. Like he can shoot the ball. He's got a fairly good defensive IQ. Like he can get in passing lanes. Like he's averaging, I don't know what he's actually averaging steals wise, but he's actually getting in passing lanes, stuff like that. I think sometimes Steph perhaps risks too much on the defensive end and can like often get caught out trying to go for like the wonderful defensive plays, getting a steal or whatever else, and it actually bites him because he kind of leaves his man a little bit on the perimeter. So maybe he kind of risks too much there, but like he's got those things down pat. It's just that he's smaller. Like he's not 6'7", 6'8" like Dyson Daniels is. So I'm not comparing Steph Curry and Dyson Daniels on the defensive side of the floor. I never do that. Dyson's clearly superior there. Steph's clearly a superior offensive player. Clearly Steph's a superior player overall. But I think it goes to show like a lot of these guys around the league, they might have one or two of those elements, but to have all three at an absolute like top tier elite level, that's what makes Dyson Daniels so good defensively, and a guy that at 21 years old, like he could be a perennial All-NBA first-team defense guy for the next 10 to 12 years. And that's really exciting for Australian basketball because, we've got a lot of guys in the league, and we've had a lot of guys in the league over the last 10, 15 years. But in terms of guys that can actually really get individual accolades, we don't really have it. And this, Dyson being a potential depoy candidate and at the very least being, on an all defensive team, that's something for us as Australians. Like the only one really in recent years is like, Simmons being a 3-time All-Star. And obviously we know how that's going. So to have another guy who's in the conversation for, individual accolades, that's something for Australian fans and something that I'm pretty excited about. In terms of other things from a Hawks standpoint, in fact, I just want to mention one more play, that I forgot about in terms of, that I've just got on my notes here, in terms of Daniels, just to kind of showcase that combination of size and the IQ. There's a play in the Hawks-Wizards game a couple of games ago where Jonas Valanciunas had the ball outside the perimeter, and you could tell he was trying to hand the ball off to Jordan Poole. And Dyson made it really, really difficult to do that, and kind of the denial was excellent. And then Jonas eventually threw the ball as Dyson was actually looking away from him. So he had his eyes kind of on Jordan Poole and chasing him around, was not looking at Valanciunas, and yet was able to predict when Valanciunas was going to throw the ball. And so as Valanciunas tried to lob the ball over Daniels to Poole, Dyson jumped up at the exact perfect time, and the ball like hit the back of his arms. And again, he got the steal off and running. Like he wasn't even looking at the ball or at Valanciunas on that play, and yet came up with a steal. Like it's that kind of stuff where it's like you can't teach that to a degree. You can't teach the combination of size and the length and the defensive IQ to be able to pull off a play like that. So that's going to be a fascinating battle to me. I think there's every chance Steph goes off and proves a point here that, hey, you think this guy's some kind of defensive phenom. He's earned the nickname Great Barrier Thief. Like there's all this stuff. Well, I'm just gonna show you. I'll go out and drop 30 on his head, 35 on his head. Like Steph might take that personally. Who knows? We'll wait and see. And they've come up against each other before, obviously, with Dyson at the Pelicans. I think they've played internationally against each other with the US against the Boomers as well. But this is like the first real time where Dyson's actually playing legitimate 30, 35 minutes a game. And he's going to have an opportunity to go out there and maybe Quinn Snyder's like, okay, you just match Steph's minutes. You're just out there the entire time. So it's going to be a fascinating battle. In terms of other things from the Hawks, from an offensive standpoint, Trey scored 7 points yesterday on 1 of 7 shooting. Kind of makes me nervous whenever like a guy who's an all-star caliber offensive player has a quiet shooting game or a poor shooting game. Kind of makes me nervous. He's averaging 22.6 points and 11.6 assists on the season. We know he's capable of leading a team that can put up 120 points on any given night. Like, he's that type of player. And they've got other guys around him like Dyson, DeAndre Hunter, and Jaylen Johnson are all averaging over at least 14.9 points per game. I love Jaylen Johnson. He's one of my favorite young players in the league as well. 19.4 points, 9.9 rebounds, 5.4 assists, and over a steal and a block per game so far this season. I always kind of often put him and Kuminga in similar boat as like young athletic guys, same draft, especially second half of last season, where both guys were kind of popping off the page a little bit and looked to be, a couple of the most improved players in the league. And, during the off season, I had them in a very similar boat as well. Unfortunately, like this season, Jaylen Johnson's kind of taken the next step, and Kuminga is like, he's playing okay, but he just hasn't quite lived up to what we thought he could be. And obviously he's in a bench role and he's playing okay at the moment, but it's not quite what we expected. And Jaylen Johnson, is in a starting role and putting up 20 and 10 basically, over 5 assists, over a steal and a block per game. It's a little bit disappointing when you think about the fact, like, again, I had those two during the offseason. There's very similar level young players. One has taken that next step and the other, for the Warriors, hasn't quite. And that's why, like, Jaylen Johnson got 5 years, $150 million from the Hawks just before that October 21 deadline. And that's exactly the contract I would have given to Kuminga. Like, they were so similar to me. It's like, whatever this guy gets, the other guy should get. Now, it sounds like the Warriors may have offered that, and Kuminga wanted close to $35 million a season. It doesn't matter. It's over and done with now. But I've been very impressed with Jaylen Johnson. The three ball is coming along. Like, I think he might only be at like 33% for the season, but he's taking them. And he's got a good feel for the game. Defensively, he's pretty good. He's obviously got a lot of length. He's like 6'10" or whatever. So he's a fantastic prospect for the Hawks, who have a lot of guys like that where they're just like long and rangy. Hunter's only played 4 games this season, but has been much improved in those 4 games compared to what we've seen in the past. At the moment, he's putting up 20.5 points on 50, 48, 86 shooting splits. Had 24 points, I think, on 9 and 15 shooting against the Kings yesterday. I'm not sure if that's sustainable. He's been a guy that hasn't necessarily lived up to expectations after being a high pick quite some years ago now, but that's nonetheless a strong start for him, despite the injuries that he's dealt with this season already and has dealt with in the past. So they're a team that the Warriors should be beating, particularly at Chase Center, but they're dangerous because a Trae Young-led offense is capable. I think the Warriors, even with Dyson Daniels and the kind of length that the Hawks can throw out there, they still are a younger team to a degree, with guys like Dyson Daniels, as I said, Jaylen Johnson, Riss Archie is the number 1 overall pick, who kind of goes under the radar, or as under the radar as you can get for a number 1 overall pick. So they're still quite young and inexperienced, and as a result, I think the Warriors will have a much easier time offensively than what they did yesterday against the Clippers, and should be able to get the win. But nonetheless, the Hawks are, they're going to be a challenge, right? They can prove problematic if they bring it, particularly offensively. They can be very dangerous with Trae leading the offense and then guys feeding off that like Jaylen Johnson, Hunter, Daniels, all these guys. For the Warriors, from an injury standpoint, just a couple of things. Kyle Anderson is questionable with neck spasms. Steph Curry and Kevon Looney both probable for the game, so they should suit up. Of course, Looney missed yesterday's game through illness. Just another update on DeAnthony Melton as well. Doesn't sound great. This is like the first time the Warriors announced on Thursday that he was undergoing more testing. This is kind of the first time that anyone's spoken since that. I'll just get the quote up here for you from Steve Kerr. He was talking to, I think it was Willard and Dibbs on 95.7 The Game. I'll just get it up here just so I can read it word for word for you. He said, he's been seeking other opinions. We've been really evaluating everything just to try to get him the best advice he can get. And we're obviously very concerned. We're really taking our time and making sure D'Anthony gets all the advice he needs. That sounds incredibly pessimistic. Like that, to me, like they're not putting a specific timeline on it. To me, this sounds like it's probably more likely months than weeks. Like, I would be surprised if we saw D'Anthony Melton again before the end of the calendar year. And I don't know, it might be a full month of January. I don't know. Like, I'm just speculating, but I'm just going off, like, what the talk is. And for Steve to concede it's very concerning himself, I mean, that just goes to show you, really, that this is a real problem. And it's incredibly disappointing because we saw, the Warriors go to that starting lineup with Melton at the 2, and it looked like, okay, that's going to be the lineup for the foreseeable future, and now it's had to change again, and Lindy Waters at 3rd starting. I'm not sure if that's, like, going to be the starting 5, moving forward now. Like, I kind of doubt it. Might still be some mixing and matching there. Who knows? But it's disappointing. It's really disappointing for him, obviously. I think I looked it up before. He's played like 14 of the last possible 69 games. Like, obviously 38 games last season with the 76ers. Already missed 5 games with the back issue for the Warriors earlier this season, then has that ACL sprain. It's very disappointing for him. Obviously going to be a free agent again next off-season, looking to make money. That's obviously, this is going to hurt him and his chances of doing that. And from a Warriors standpoint, again, they looked like they had this starting lineup, which I was really optimistic about. I thought, yep, this is their starting 5. This can be really good on both ends of the floor. And unfortunately, we saw 2 games of it, 2 great wins against OKC, and then, against the Mavericks in Clay's homecoming. And unfortunately, since then, from that, Melton gets injured in the final minutes, and yeah, we'll wait and see. It's extremely disappointing, and Steve's comments today make it sound pretty pessimistic on when he could possibly be back. All right, just a couple other things here. Moving on from the game tomorrow, I was having a bit of a think about it before and I want to get out in front of this before. I'm not going to say the Warriors are going to come out and lose some games here. The schedule's actually not too bad. They should continue winning. But I just want to talk about an issue that I think will become far more problematic if they start losing some games, right? And this is the thing, like, winning can cover cracks, right? You can have issues, you can have problems, but if you're winning, then those kind of get pushed to the side and we talk about the positive stuff, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what sport is. It's a win or loss business at the end of the day. And if you're the Warriors and you've got a 36-year-old Steph Curry somewhere near his prime, you're all about winning. And so long as they're winning, we as fans, we're happy, right? We don't really care. Like, obviously, myself covering the team, we're going to analyze everything and analyze the negatives and stuff that could be improved on and stuff. But it's not going to be too much of a concern until it actually starts losing a game. It's like the free throw shooting. The free throw shooting was a huge concern over the first 12 games of the season. Warriors ranked dead last, but we really didn't talk about it hugely. Like, we didn't really talk about it significantly until it actually cost the Warriors a game, right? So this is what happens. And so this is why I want to get out in front of it before it potentially becomes a much more problematic issue. So over the last few years, probably one of, if not the biggest storyline, ongoing storyline around the Warriors has been to do with their young players, right? And how much playing time those guys have gotten from essentially almost the moment Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga got drafted. Now, maybe not in their rookie season 2021-22, because for a couple of reasons, they're rookies on an experienced playoff team. You can understand them not playing too much in that environment. And the Warriors were winning. The Warriors were winning, and they ultimately won a championship. So that's fine, no worries. Second year, okay, we start seeing like Anthony Lamb, Ty Jerome playing a little bit more over guys like Kuminga and Moody. The whole Wiseman experiment fell to pieces. We saw that. So that was a bit of a nightmare, right? Last season, it was like a little bit. You had the Kuminga Moody situation. It was like separate. You had the Kuminga Moody situation where it's like these guys aren't playing enough, and you had obviously Kuminga in that January 5 game where things kind of went wild, where he was like, went to the media after the game, and there was reports that he no longer had faith in Steve Kerr and stuff like that. And how many times did fans say, Moses has got to play more? What is going on? Moses has got to play more. When he's out there, he plays well. All this different stuff. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you had Trace and BP, who as rookies were actually playing quite significant amounts, particularly by the second half of the season, where Pods briefly took Clay's spot in the starting lineup, but then Trace at the end of the season became the starting five. So it's been an ongoing storyline for the Warriors, and I fear that it's going to be so again. And it was kind of always going to be the case, but maybe more so than what we thought, because there are serious question marks on all four of these young players at the moment. Kuminga, clearly, you're going to be a restricted free agent next offseason, and you're in a bench role. That's not ideal. As good as you've been playing for the majority since that fourth game of the season where he moved back to the bench, we all thought, oh, geez, how's this going to work? How's this going to look? It's been pretty good. The Warriors have kept winning, and JK's been a significant part of that. But in the grand scheme of things, it's okay, so how does this impact his free agency and what the Warriors are willing to pay and all that stuff, what he's after? So there's clearly question marks there. Moody obviously got the contract, and so you think, okay, well, maybe his playing time and stuff isn't really an issue. Well, I mean, it still kind of is. If you're going to be starting to pay him an average of $13 million a year from the start of the next season, you want that guy to be a solid, good rotation player, playing 18 to 20 minutes a game. He hasn't played more than 17 minutes in any of his last 8 games. That's a bit of a worry, I would say, for him. And the fact that he didn't get the start over Lindy Waters III when Melton went out. I just thought Melton's out. Okay, Moody's the next guy up. He's the guy to take the starting two-guard spot. And then it goes to Waters, who has been very good, but he's a bit of a journeyman. He's 27 now, been through the G League a heap with OKC, obviously. He's been around the traps kind of thing. Obviously, a much more experienced player, but without necessarily the upside of Moses Moody, you wouldn't have thought. And so for Waters to get the job there over Moody, I think was pretty notable, and we'll see if that maintains moving forward. TJD, so he's in a starting role, so there's no issue there, but he's also just played 20-plus minutes in 3 games this season out of 13. 10 games where he's under 20 minutes. And I spoke a lot yesterday in the post-game live. If you haven't checked it out, go do so. I spoke a lot yesterday about potential center options, where I think that's really the spot the Warriors could try and get a pretty significant upgrade, because I'm not sure Trace Jackson-Davis right now is the starting center on a good playoff team. And that's how we want to view the Warriors, is they're out to this 10-3 start. Okay, so not only do you want to make the playoffs, but it's the West is pretty open right now. The West is pretty... OKC just lost to the Spurs. Every team has at least 4 losses apart from the Warriors, who only have 3. You should look at the conference and think, you know what? There's actually there's room to try and make a deep run here, to try and get to the West Finals or even out of the West and make the NBA Finals. That's what we should probably be looking at right now. And so looking at that, it's can Trace Jackson-Davis be the starting center on a team that makes the playoffs? Yeah, sure. But a guy that actually can be a starting center in a Western Conference Finals matchup, I have my reservations on that. I have real question marks on that. And so that's the area to me where the Warriors can find an upgrade. And again, there's that question mark there from a TJD standpoint. And then probably the biggest issue right now is Pods. So the only good thing about Pods right now is that he's inspiring me to take charges. Played, again, as I said earlier in the episode, played Social League last night, drew a charge. I think it was the second quarter. Stood just outside the paint, saw it coming from a mile away, drew the charge, ref straight away, offensive foul, thanks for coming, and I thought of Pods. Yep, fantastic, learned that from you. Great. Both left-handed guys, whatever. The comparison's there, trying to compare myself to Pods. But honestly, that's about all that he's doing in terms of inspiring me at the moment, because he's not really inspiring me with much else he's doing on the floor, right? He's just not an offensive threat. His shooting splits this season are deplorable. He's 38, 19, and 60. 38% from the floor, 19% from 3. His threes just don't even look like going. They're not even close most of the time. He's 60% from the line. We saw him go to the line on a 3-point shooting foul yesterday. Made the first one, again, rimmed it home, wasn't overly convincing, and then missed the next two. Not that I can talk, went 0 of 2 last night, but it's disappointing. Like, we thought this guy, and it's really funny because I think coming into this season, if you said the Warriors are 10-3 after 13 games, they've beaten Boston in Boston, Oklahoma City in Oklahoma City. Like, they've had these good wins and they're off to such a good start. I would have said, the young guy's taking a leap. Kuminga's playing really well, or Pods is playing really well. Both those guys are playing really well. Moody's playing a role. TJD's the starting center. I would have said those guys at least one of those guys have really popped. It hasn't been the case. In fact, some like these guys are almost the more disappointing players on the team, despite the fact they've gone 10-3. And so it's a little bit of an issue where we thought these guys were going to become really core pieces, and then you look at a game like the Clippers yesterday where all 4 guys just played less than 20 minutes, right? And they're just not really big factors. We thought they were going to be. So maybe you could be optimistic about it and say, well, you know what? They're actually not getting much out of their young guys right now. That's still an area for improvement where those guys could obviously get better, and therefore the Warriors could get better. Maybe that's the case. But I don't know. I think if the Warriors start losing some games and these young guys are playing, less than 20 minutes a game, that's going to be a bit of a worry. And again, there's obviously going to be the chatter about, do you package these guys up to make a move to try and get another starting caliber player? I think to give them up, you've still got to probably try and get an all-star level player rather than just a starting caliber player. But who knows? The issue is they're not increasing their value. Their value is going down. Kuminga's value has gone down simply by the fact that he's going to be a free agent next offseason. You're going to have to pay him $30+ million most likely. That's going to cause teams to hesitate. It did in the offseason already. And then Pods, well, I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but the Warriors could have missed an opportunity by not selling high on him, where the Warriors were saying that he was going to be a star. Pods was saying he was going to be a star. And by the sounds of it, he was viewed very, very highly around the league. Well, again, if you're coming out and averaging less points, rebounds, assists than you did in your rookie year, and you've got 38, 19, 60 shooting splits, I can guarantee you your value hasn't gone up. Let's put it that way. And so did the Warriors potentially miss an opportunity there? It's still too early for me to absolutely categorically say that. And there's still a good chance that Brandon Podziemski turns things around and is at the very least a 25-minute per game player, a guy that down the line is a good 4th, 5th starter on a team, and with the more minuscule chance, but still a chance of being the star player that he and the Warriors envisage, right? So there's still time, but I want to put it out there before it becomes a huge issue if the Warriors start losing some games. And so it's just a watch for me right now. It's not hugely concerning because while the Warriors are still winning games, you can kind of park it a little bit. But when the Warriors start losing games, that's when it's going to become an issue. The funny thing to me is, though, it's kind of flipped here where throughout the last couple of years, usually the theme is these young guys aren't playing. What the hell is Steve doing? Because when they do play, they play well. And for the Warriors to be good, they need these guys out there to improve and become the players that they can be. And so there's a lot of criticism for Steve. I think right now the criticism's on the players, not Steve. I don't have an issue with Steve and the minutes that he gave those guys yesterday. I just don't think they're playing well enough. The only one I would argue yesterday is against the Clipper team who, can really bog you down into half-court offense. Maybe you needed Kuminga's explosiveness and his one-on-one shot creating ability a little bit more than the 19 minutes he played. That's the only one where I'd say, okay, maybe he should have played more. But other than that, Pods doesn't deserve any more than 15, 20 minutes right now. TJD doesn't deserve any more than 15, 20 minutes right now. Moody, maybe you could argue, right? He's shooting 45% from 3 this season. But then again, the Warriors do have a lot of other options at the 2-3 position. So I don't know. Last thing I want to get to here before we finish up, the Brooklyn Nets report from The Athletic earlier today that they're open for business. I just wanted to go through a few players here, whether the Warriors should have interest or not. Uh, just going off the top of my head here, Nick Claxton. I don't think so. I spoke yesterday quite a bit on the post-game live about potential center options. I would like a center with some offensive skill who can actually shoot the ball a little bit. I think Claxton's more of a defensive presence, and as a result, is he going to be that much of an upgrade on Loon and TJD to the point where it's worth giving up assets for him and to get a guy like him on $20 million a year? I don't think it is. I don't think that's necessarily a big enough upgrade on a defensive-minded center. Now, yes, he's athletic. He can throw it down at the rim. He can be a pick-and-roll threat for you. He can be the lob threat for you. But I want someone a bit more to their offensive game than that. And so, again, I don't think the defensive upgrade is worth bringing in a guy that's on $20 million and the assets that Brooklyn would want. Dorian Finney-Smith, semi-interest, but you'd probably have to flip two of your depth pieces for him, and he's really probably only a depth piece himself anyway. He's making $13, $14 million a year. Good 3-and-D player. Do the Warriors need a guy like him? I don't think so. I think they've got enough options to kind of cover that. He's a guy that the Warriors, I think, should have had interest in the past. Maybe right now, given the depth they've got, I don't see it. Is GP2 and Looney or something worthwhile for Finney-Smith? I don't think so. Again, I don't think that's enough of an upgrade to be worthwhile and to disrupt potentially the team chemistry. It's just me. Cam Johnson, a little bit more interest because you could open up some things from a combination lineup standpoint with him at the 4, where there's more shooting on the floor. There's no doubt about that. But he's also not overly big, so it's not like you could bring him in and say, oh, well, him and Draymond are your 4-5. Well, no, you're just still incredibly small, and that opens up some defensive issues for you. So, I don't know. Again, making a $20, $22 million mark, you'd have to do a 3-for-1 trade. And is Cam Johnson a guy that you're going to be willing to kind of gut some of your depth for? I don't think so, as much as the Warriors could probably utilize his shooting at the 4 position. I think the salary matching issues there probably too much. Again, I said it on the post-game live yesterday. It's the depth is a really strong point for the Warriors to the point where I don't think you want to be giving that up unless you're getting a surefire, either an all-star or at the very least a guy that you can pencil in and say, okay, he's definitely playing 30 minutes for us every night. Cam Thomas. Interesting because of the salary aspect, because he's making, you could trade Kuminga for Cam Thomas straight up. I'm not sure I'd do that. Look, it became, it was evident in yesterday's game that Warriors could do with more shot creation, and Cam Thomas can actually give you that. He's been impressive this season. The Nets as a team have been impressive. That's why they should be very open for business, because they're trying to tank, but they've got too many, reasonable players to actually be good at tanking, I suppose. Cam Thomas has been okay, right? And he's going to have some interest because you look at the numbers and you think, 25 points a game, good efficiency. Is that a guy that we should have interest in? I still look at Cam Thomas and think, not a Warrior player. Not a guy that's going to thrive in Steve Kerr's offensive system where the ball moves and players move. Just not for me. Although, maybe I would have said something similar about, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. Dennis Schroeder. Now, out of the 5 that I've mentioned here, I think Schroeder might be the best, just because Pods is obviously your backup right now, and he's just not creating enough offense for you. He's not creating enough offense. He's not enough of a scoring threat himself. And yes, he moves the ball, and yes, he can dribble into the paint and kick it out occasionally and stuff like that, but it's just early 4th quarter yesterday where the Warriors were kind of in the game, and then the Clippers, going up against the second unit, kind of extended a bit of a lead again before the main guys came back in. That was a bit rough watching offensively. And so if you put in a guy like Schroeder in that situation, I think you're going to be able to manage offensively quite a bit better. And I think again, the Warriors could probably get away with it during the regular season, but come playoff time when Steph's off the floor, I think it could be more important in those positions to have a guy like Dennis Schroeder, who's a veteran point guard, who is capable of running an offense and not just being a scoring threat himself, but also a playmaking threat. I don't know, he's making, again, like $13 million. It'd have to be like a 2-for-1 trade in that scenario. It's one of those ones where you give Pods another couple of months leading up until the deadline. Like, we're still over 2 months until the deadline. You give him that period to say, okay, well, you're still our backup point guard. You've got all this opportunity to showcase what you've got. But if this kind of continues, then that's when, you're getting into early February, trade deadlines coming up. It's like, okay, could a guy like Schroeder really make a difference for us? Not a huge difference. It's not going to be the difference between winning the championship or not. But in playoff situations, you might feel a little bit more comfortable with his shot creation and his ability to run the offense. Don't know. Let me know what you guys think. If there's anyone on Brooklyn that you think the Warriors should trade for, if you're concerned at all with the Warrior younger players and who in particular out of Kuminga, Podziemski, Trace and Moses. If you've got any thoughts on the game tomorrow, feel free to leave them as well. Other than that, I'll finish it up. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that'd be greatly appreciated. Follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on Twitter. You can see some of the action shots. We had a photographer there taking photos of the basketball game last night. And also, you can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Golden State with Mates as well. Won't be able to do a post-game live after the game tomorrow, but I will certainly have a podcast episode reviewing the game. Hopefully, the Warriors can get the win, move to 11-3 on the season, and maintain their top seed in the Western Conference. Other than that, guys, until next time.